Good morning and welcome to Blackpool. Please welcome Member of Parliament for Blackpool North and Cleveleys, Paul Maynard.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to Blackpool. I've been waiting 15 years for you, rooted to the spot, and now you're all here, and it's fantastic. I'm joined by someone who needs no introduction, Rishi Sunak, Chancellor of the Exchequer. Now, Rishi, I know it's your first conference. It's your first conference here in Blackpool, but I know it's not your first time here in Blackpool. What do you make of it so far?
Well, it's great. The sun's shining. Well, that's a fantastic start. Thank you very much. It's great to be back here. Everyone's having a fantastic time, as far as I can tell, this morning. And I'm looking, actually, you know what, we were just talking outside, but I'm looking forward to bringing my kids back in the autumn for illuminations, which I've been had very recommended, and of course, Strictly.
Oh, yes.
Which we're a big Strictly household, so my girls were excited about that this morning.
I don't want you being a contestant quite yet. I think you've got much more to run, so yes. Now, you were appointed Chancellor. Within 3 weeks, you had the pandemic, real baptism of fire. Tell us what it was like within that Treasury bubble.
Well, I got the job, what is it, middle of February, you're right. And actually, at that point, I had a budget to do in 3 weeks. And I thought, gosh, the hardest thing I'm ever going to have to do in my entire life is to put together a budget in 3.5 weeks, which we did, and it went well. But it turned out that was then the easiest thing I had to do for the next 2 years. So the few weeks after that were incredibly stressful. And as you said, we had to deal with the pandemic. The main thing about that was there was absolutely no playbook. So normally when it comes to economic policy, there's someone who's dealt with the problem before. We've got some policies that we think would work, address the situation, look at a textbook, see what happens somewhere else. There was nothing like that here. So I had an amazing team around me when we had to try and think very fast about what to do that would make a difference. Obviously we were creating things we didn't 100% know whether they would work or not. And the good news is that it looks like they broadly did, which we should come on to. But mainly thanks to the hard work of a fantastic team at the Treasury and my ministerial colleagues.
Now, you gave us back a word we'd forgotten. Furlough, that we all now know what it means. How did that come about in the Treasury? Where did the idea come from? Who gets the credit? Is it you?
No, definitely not. There's a huge team of people who were involved in it. And actually, I talked a little bit about it at those press conferences. I talked about the team at HMRC. And look, I think we can be honest. The tax man is not always everyone's favourite person. But in this instance, the team at HMRC did an extraordinary job, because it was all very well us coming up with the policy. For a policy like this that impacted literally tens of millions of people, millions of businesses, it needed to work, and it needed to work fast. And it was a team there, an operational team, who stood up this entire new programme, new government scheme at record pace in 4 weeks or whatever it was. And it never collapsed, it never fell over, it got money to people when they needed it. And they deserve enormous credit for it. And if it wasn't for them, and wasn't for the work that they did, millions and millions of people would have lost their job. And the fact that they didn't, I think, is one of the great achievements of this Conservative government, and hopefully something that you're all very proud of.
So you've had the pandemic, you've had disruptions to supply chains, we've now had the invasion of Ukraine. It's one thing after another.
Yes.
Now, I know as a minister, you need the time to take a step back, look at the overall perspective. How do you create that time amidst so much going on?
Yeah, no, you're right. It has been a little bit, for all of us, actually, the Prime Minister more than anyone, just crisis to crisis. It feels like that, which isn't great. I mean, it's not great for any of us. But, I think the thing that we all have, and you have this as well, you have it here, is unlike almost any other political system, other than the ones that are modelled on ours, we have a link to our constituencies. And that's something that's very special about our system. And my counterparts, my finance ministers in other countries, or the Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, or whoever it is, we have our big summits, and we're sitting somewhere, or we're having a big meeting, and then I will leave that, and they'll say, oh, what are you doing? And I'll say, well, I'm heading back to North Yorkshire, and I'll tell them about what I'm doing on Friday, and I'm in this village hall in the Dales, doing a surgery, opening this fete, talking to these farmers at the auction mart. And that's something that they find just incomprehensible, but actually is such a wonderful part of our political system. And it's great for me because it gets me out of Westminster. I'm there with my constituents. And that grounding, I think, gives you brilliant perspective, and particularly because they're straight-talking Northern Yorkshire constituents, which is very helpful, hopefully some of you here. And I think that's great for all of us, actually, as ministers. So it's a good thing that we have that.
No, I know when I sit in the chamber, I sit right at the back, on the back row, often looking very grumpy if you see it on TV. I watch you in there and you exude a calm competence, nothing ruffles you, you sail the noise. Is that the real Rishi, or is there pressure being felt underneath? How do you cope with, you must surely feel the pressure.
It's a good thing my wife's not here, actually. You get the real story. But, part of my job is to make sure that I can project reassurance to the country. And, that's part of my job. I'm the person responsible for the country's finances, for the economy, and on your behalf, on the government's behalf, I think people look to me to give them that reassurance. They want to know that this Conservative government and their Conservative Chancellor has got a grip of the situation. And yes, things are tough at times, as they were during coronavirus, but they want someone to tell it to them straight and let them know that we've got a plan and that we're going to be on their side, help them get through it, and we'll emerge stronger on the other side. So, it's part of my job to do that, whether I feel it or not inside. But one thing I've found over the past couple of years is, I think people respect honesty. And particularly if things are going to be difficult, actually, I'd much rather be open with people about that. And I tried to do that right at the beginning of the crisis. I remember I did an interview. It was on my 40th birthday, and I'd had the job a couple of months. It was my first big interview with Laura Koonsberg from the BBC, and we were sitting down. And I said in that interview, I'm not going to be able to save everyone's job, actually, and people are going to lose their jobs because of what's happening. And it was the first time anyone had acknowledged that. But I thought it was better to be honest with people about it, but then say, look, this is all the things we're going to do to help people. We're going to help find them new jobs. We're going to make sure they're well paid, give them the skills and the training they need. And I think that approach, even though it might sound a bit counterintuitive, is one that people respond well to. So that's what I try and do.
Now, you mentioned Laura Koonsberg. I rather fancy myself as the next Laura Koonsberg. So I've got to ask the really difficult questions that politicians don't want to have to answer. Want to dodge, so if you can dodge this. Chancellor, how do you relax? Really difficult one, isn't it?
Well, I have two young girls who are 9 and 10, and they're at that beautiful age where they don't really have that much interest in what I'm doing, which is marvellous. They're old enough to appreciate it, and that's great, and they kind of know that they live in Downing Street during the week, and that's something special, and they know that the daddy's job is important. But they don't, they're not watching the evening news every day. They're not reading newspapers, so they're largely not that bothered, which is great. So they're interested in their life, and they want me to be interested in what they're doing. And actually, for the first time this afternoon, I'm taking a tiny half hour off, which I never normally do, to see my daughter's. She's in her school play, and they're doing The Lion King, and that's what we've spent the last week practicing and spending time on. Nothing that I'm particularly focused on, and that's probably the easiest way. Yeah. That and taking nice walks in Yorkshire with our new dog. So we got a dog last year. That the girls were adamant that we got a puppy. I've said no for many, many years. And this is what happens when I got this job. I became essentially a kind of absentee dad, absentee husband, and I lost all my moral authority in the house to say no to anything. So we got this puppy, and now that is our main way to relax.
And we're down to know the dog's name. Is that public yet?
Yeah, that is public. Her name is Nova.
So Dylan has competition.
Dylan has, yes. They play in the Downing Street garden sometimes together. Yes.
Very nicely, I hope.
Yes. Dylan is very boisterous, and Nova, she's a Labrador. She's a kind of working Fox Red Lab. At first, she struggled a bit with that because he was very energetic, but now she's about 3 times his size, so that helps.
Bit of inequality.
Yeah.
There we are. Now, as you say, we don't live in normal times right now. As Chancellor, you've had to take some quite difficult decisions, counterintuitive for many Conservatives. We've had to, grit our teeth, just think, this is difficult. How has it felt to you? How has it sat with you having to make some of these really difficult decisions for Conservatives?
Yeah, it's been really tough, and obviously you were kind not to mention the word, but the word you meant was tax, right, Paul?
I never say that word.
and it's been, gosh, I did not get into this to have to put up people's taxes, right? I'm a conservative. I'm a conservative chancellor. It's the last thing I wanted to do, but I also take really seriously my responsibility to you, our kids, and to the nation's finances. And making sure that we fix the problems that coronavirus caused, where our borrowing went up to the levels that we haven't seen since World War II, and our debt was forecast to just keep growing and growing and growing into the future. I didn't think that was right. I didn't think it was morally right. I didn't think it was economically responsible. And much as people forget, Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson, who I hugely look up to for inspiration, they had to do some similar things at the start of that period, which people forget. We remember all the brilliant things they did to cut taxes over the course of her time in office. But when they started, they inherited this huge deficit, which they first had to tackle. And Margaret Thatcher was adamant, as was Nigel Lawson, that you had to tackle the deficit first. And then once you'd done that, then you could start the work of cutting taxes. And you could do that only if you were being careful with public spending. So that's what I've had to do. And it was not easy, but I do believe it was the right thing to do. But, and I made this very clear at the budget in the autumn, that is done. Right, we've made the difficult decisions that we have to make. My priority going forward is to cut taxes. I made that very clear at the budget. We started then, actually, with something that you and I had talked about, which is cutting taxes on the lowest paid, those who are on universal credit, something called the taper rate, which will mean those on the lowest incomes are going to be £1,000 a year better off as a result of that tax cut. And that's just the start. My plan over the course of this Parliament is to keep cutting taxes, get the tax burden down. That's what we believe. We want people to keep more of their own money. We want to help grow the economy. But I want to do that in a responsible and sustainable way. But I now believe we're on a path to do that. And I'm confident that we will get there and I'll be able to deliver for all of you.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, you delivered your Mays lecture. I'm going to two shoes. I've read it. I'm sure the whole audience have read it and can answer questions on it. But that sets out your vision for the future economy. Can you try and summarise what that future vision is so we know where we're heading to in these broad sunlit uplands?
Yeah, and that was a great example of what we're dealing with. I've been working for weeks on this lecture, if not months, and it's an important one. And I talked about Nigel Lawson. He gave that lecture. Most chancellors give this lecture. It's an important part of the job. And it's a chance to set out one's views on the economy. I ended up doing it on the day that Ukraine was invaded by Russia, and it's just kind of a sense of what we're grappling with. But in it, I talked about building a new culture of enterprise as my vision for the economy that I want to build. And it's a vision of the economy that is much more reliant on the private sector. I made the kind of political observation at the beginning of the lecture that, during coronavirus, of course the government had to step in and do lots of things. That we were dealing with a pandemic, a crisis. It's natural that government has to do some certain things, but it's not right that government carries on doing all those things. Right? We believe in the power of the individual, families, communities, businesses to drive growth and wealth in our country, and we must get back to that. I think that's served us really well as a party for decades. It's the right thing for the country. So that was the kind of overarching point. And in terms of how we do that, there were three areas I said we need to focus on to drive up our growth rate: capital, people, and ideas. So capital, we have a huge problem in this country. For decades, our businesses underinvest in stuff, in kit, in factories, in machines, in robots, in tools to help us be more productive. So what we said is we need to use the tax system to change the incentives to make it cheaper and easier for business to invest in things. That's the capital bit. The next bit is people. Again, one of our problems in this country is we underinvest in training. Right? We've got 80% of our future workforce already in work. Our 2030 workforce, imagine that, all those decade ahead, they're all 80% of them already in work. Yet we're hugely underskilled relative to most other countries for technical education, and we underinvest in improving it. So we need to, again, look at the tax system to find ways to improve that, whether it's apprenticeships or other things. And then the last thing was innovation, ideas. That's the greatest source of growth. Having an economy where constantly we're coming up with new ideas, new innovations, which will transform how we do things. I'm very inspired by my experience living in California, in Silicon Valley, where I saw that firsthand. But we as a country have been really good at it in the past, but we're getting a bit less good at it. And again, we need our businesses to invest more in R&D. So what I said is I want to use the tax system and cut taxes on all those things to stimulate private sector to do more of it, and I think that will drive up our growth. That's the new culture of enterprise that we're going to build.
Okay, excellent. Now, as I said, I want to be Laura Kuenssberg, so let me try another Laura Kuenssberg question. Are we amongst friends? You can be honest, you know, no one's going to leak it. What...
I think it's being live streamed, right? So,
well, what's going to be in the spring statement? You know, you can share it with us, surely.
No, well, that's nice. That's a nice try, Paul. And I'll probably get some of that on Sunday as well when I do this again. And I can't obviously talk in detail about the spring statement, but what I would say is, you know, it will actually just reprise some of the things that you've already been asking me about. It's just taking stock of the situation, which of course is difficult. And I can see that, and I have enormous sympathy for what people are going through at the moment. And that's why we'll always be there to help make a difference where we can. Now, I can't solve every problem. No government can solve every problem, and particularly when you're grappling with global inflationary forces, you know, they are somewhat out of my control. But as you saw a month or so ago when we announced a very significant intervention to help people meet some of the additional costs of energy bills, you know, where we can make a difference, of course I can. I'm always going to do that. We've done it over the last 2 years. So we'll have an update on the situation and a little bit of a look forward as to where we're heading.
Okay, excellent. So you've got a few more hours left in Blackpool. Bit early in the season for the donkey riding, so you can't do that, I'm afraid. Can we tempt you up Blackpool Town maybe in your few remaining hours?
Yeah.
What else are you going to be doing?
Well, that does sound like a plan. We're just about to plot. I'm figuring out what time my train is, and then if I've got time to do a quick whiz around, that is the plan. So I'm getting some nods and shakes from my team over here. So, but yeah, no, as I said, I'll be hopefully back with the kids for the illuminations in the autumn, if you'll have me. So you
might even find you doing an association event. It's
there we go.
A very risky, very risky saying that, you know. So thank you for kicking off our Spring Forum in such an interesting and fascinating way. Great to have you here and the rest of you. And let's get on with the show.
Thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of the show. Paul, thanks very much.
Please welcome Minister for Brexit Opportunities and Government Efficiency, Jacob Rees-Mogg.